Today we're going to continue our discussion about solving one-step equations. And you'll notice on the board behind me are the two vocab words that we reviewed during the beginning of our last equation lesson. A variable is the unknown, represented by a lowercase letter. The variable is what we're trying to isolate in our equation. An equation is a math saying with an equal sign. And just as a reminder, just as last time, our goal is to solve an equation, to find out what the variable equals. Last time we talked about solving equations using adding and subtracting to get the variable alone. So today our one step is going to be solving equations using multiplication and division to get the variable alone. So to recap, our goal to isolate the variable. In other words, to find out what it is. And we're going to do that by doing the opposite of what we see. So if we see multiplication, we're going to get the variable alone by doing division. If we see division, we're going to get the variable alone by doing multiplication. So, in order to isolate the variable, do the opposite of the operation you see. So, if you see multiplication, you're going to do division. If you see division, you're going to do multiplication. Let's try some examples. X equals 75. So remember, touching means timesing. So 5 and the x are touching, so the operation that is implicit there is multiplication. So in order to get rid of that 5, because our goal again is to get that x by itself, we need to make the 5 cancel out. So the way we cancel it out is to divide it, because any number over itself becomes 1, and that will get rid of that 5. So if I divide on that side by 5, I have to divide on the other side by 5. Remember, the deal with equations is we are allowed to do whatever we want as long as we do the same thing to both sides. So on the left-hand side, 5 over 5 becomes 1 and it cancels out. On the right-hand side, 5 goes into 75 15 times. And so with one step, we've isolated our variable, and we now know that x is 15. Just as before, if you want to check and make sure that you got the right answer, you're not sure, plug it back in. So 5, instead of writing x, we'll write 15. Everything else drops down. 5 times 15 is 75. We know that an equation is correct when we have the same thing on both sides. Let's try another example. Okay, 1/5 h equals 17. So there's two ways that we can solve this. The first way is to think about this as multiplication. 1/5 is touching the h, so these two things are being timesed. So if we want to get rid of something being multiplied, we divide. So we could divide by 1/5. What we do to one side, we do to the other. 1/5 over 1/5 is going to cancel out. Looks kind of complicated, but it still works the same way. Now this side is a little trickier. Remember that this fraction bar means divided by. So I can rewrite this problem as 17 divided by 1/5. Those two are equivalent expressions. Dividing by a fraction means the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm going to change my division to multiplication. I'm going to change 1 over 5 to 5 over 1. 17 times 5 equals 85. And again, I can plug that back in and check. 1/5 of 85 is 17. Another way I could do this would be to multiply from the reciprocal right at the beginning. We know that any number times its reciprocal is 1. So I can multiply by 5 over 1. But if I do it to that side, I need to do it to the other side. 1/5 of 5 is 1. Those cancel out. 17 times 5 is 85. So 2 different ways to get to the same answer. So here we have 1/2 W equals -8. So just like last time, we can do it 2 different ways. I'm going to go with the reciprocal way. I think it's going to be a little bit quicker. So the opposite of 1/2 is 2 over 1. And what I multiply on by one side, I have to do to the other. 1/2 of 2 is 1, so it cancels out. W equals -8 times 2 is -16. I can put it over 1 if I want to, but it doesn't matter. -16 divided by 1 is still -16. So that's our answer. Let's do one more fraction one. -2/7 equals -14. So just as before, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of -2 over 7 is -7 over 2. What I do to one side, I do to the other. So on the left-hand side, remember multiplying by reciprocals just makes 1, so they cancel out. 1a equals, on this side, a negative times a negative is going to be a positive. 2 goes into 14 7 times 7 is 49. Alternately, if you're not comfortable with the cross reducing, you could also multiply the top, 14 times 7, and then divide it by 2. It'll work the same way. Let's try another. $275 equals -25x. It doesn't matter to us which side the x is on. All that matters is that we get the x alone. So on this side, in order to get x by itself, we need to get rid of the -25. We're going to do that by dividing by -25. -25 over -25 will cancel out. Because we did it to that side, we also have to do it to the other side. So on the right-hand side, we're left with x equals, on this side, a positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative, and 25 goes into 275 11 times. So x equals -11, or -11 equals x, either way. At this point, I think you're ready to try some problems using one-step multiplication or division to get your variable alone.